Good evening. My name is Evelyn Dunn. I'm a DNP student at Maryville University. Today I will be giving a presentation of my DNP Scholarly Project. First of all, the DNP Scholarly Project paper is 5 chapters, but for the purpose of this presentation, I will be discussing some of the highlights of this DNP Scholarly Project to look at the topic, the purpose, the focus, significance, so the benefits, as well as the implemented interventions and looking at the findings and results of the study, as well as implications for the future. So these are just some of the highlights that will be discussed, as well as additional highlights to this presentation. The title of my DNP Scholar Project is The Use of the 30-Day Self-Discovery Workbook in Helping Inmates Cope with Solitary Confinement. The chair of my DNP Scholar Project, Dr. Elizabeth Buck, words cannot describe the guidance and leadership that she offered to the DNP Scholar Project. Dr. Buck was on board with this topic from the very beginning, from our very first conversations. She saw this topic as very significant to the prison population as well as to healthcare in general. So Dr. Buck has been inspirational in the motivation, the leadership, the guidance to the DNP Scholar Project. It was very helpful to have the support and the motivations that she gave from the beginning to the end of this project. So it was my pleasure and gratitude that I salute Dr. Buck as the chair of my DNP Scholar Project. And looking at the researchers, who's myself, Evelyn Dunn, who is a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. This project was very personal to me as having worked in the prison environment for 20 years, 20 years of correctional prison healthcare experience, 30 years of combined nursing and mental health experience, as well as have been employed at the site where this project was implemented for 20 years. So all of this 20 years experience assisted me in having expanded knowledge of the overall function of the prisons, the functions, the operations, as well as my interest to this project. So this project was very significant, very personal to me, professional and personal. Looking at the purpose, significance, and aim of this project, the purpose was to determine if implementation of daily journaling among adult inmates in solitary confinement improves coping with solitary confinement. The significance of the project was if prisons continue to use solitary confinement, there is a need for ongoing innovative approaches to analyzing, developing, and implementing interventions such as this intervention that was implemented in this DNP Scholar Project to help inmates cope with solitary confinement. The aim was to improve coping among inmates in solitary confinement. Interest and expertise. I've already touched on some of this interest and expertise in my introductions as a researcher, but looking at this experience and interest is firsthand experience. As I stated earlier, uh, 20 years experience has allowed me to see some of the problems, identify some of the problems, analyze the problems, and include increase in self-interest behaviors is one of the problems we see in solitary confinement. So firsthand experiences this issue, as well as overall firsthand experience to the poor ability of inmates to cope with environmental stresses of solitary confinement. And personal and professional interests, as I stated in the introduction. I have a personal and professional interest in analyzing the effects of solitary confinement on the mental well-being of inmates. And again, as I stated earlier, supported by 20 years of correctional prison experience. All of this has increased my knowledge of the awareness of the issues, concerns, as well as the overall function operation of the prison setting. Looking at the problem and backgrounds of solitary confinement, first of all, I'd like to say solitary confinement is a lockdown of an inmate for at least 23 to 24 hours a day. They may be in there from 30 days to 6 months or to years, depending on the behaviors. So the main important thing is the lockdown. They're in solitary confinement. They're in a cell by themselves. Very limited activities, very limited to interactions with others. So looking at the problem and background, solitary confinement, the negative effects on mental health well-being have been explored in studies, several studies, and the overall theme has been that it has a negative impact on the mental, overall psychological well-being of inmates, and described as being challenging, overwhelming for any inmates. This includes inmates with or without mental health issues, and that results in psychological stresses that lead to severe mood, thought, and behavior disturbances. And one of the most distressing negative impacts on the well-being of inmates that have been self-injurious behaviors, including suicides among inmates. And it's important to realize that the lockdown, solitary confinement, prevent inmates from opportunity to participate in programs, uh, causing a lack of sensory stimuli as well as a lack of social interaction. So um, both of these issues causes a wide range of psychological disturbances based on studies on solitary confinement. And the most distressing significant outcomes, as I stated, is the high rates of self-injurious behaviors and suicides among this population. And as I stated earlier, the central theme is that solitary confinement is detrimental to the mental health well-being of inmates. All the studies that have been done have all concluded that it's detrimental. It's causing negative outcomes for the mental health well-being of inmates. The bigger question for this study project was the population intervention comparison outcome in time was among adult inmates in solitary confinement. Does the implementation of daily journaling in comparison to current practices improve coping skills within 1 month? And 1 month was this study was implemented for 1 month. Integrated review of literature. Three things were identified from the integrated review of the literature. And the first thing was impact of solitary confinement. As I discussed in the problem background, the impact of solitary confinement on the well-being, mental health well-being of inmates, and that it resulted in negative psychological well-being. The problem is social isolation, which is the problem, the theme, the cause of social isolation, and it results in mood and thought disturbances, which include anxiety, depression, insomnia, paranoia, hallucinations, and delusions, as well as self-injurious behaviors. We just talked about that. Suicides, high rates, higher in solitary confinement in comparison to other areas of the population of the prison. Journaling, which was the intervention that was implemented. Studies have been on journaling, the positive effects of journaling on improving coping in those experiencing challenging situations, such as those inmates in solitary confinement. And there have been positive outcomes associated with the use of journaling, improved coping. And inmates have stated that the problem in solitary confinement, they have nothing to do, which results in them worrying and stressing over the issues, nothing to do. So journaling provides and positive outlet for them to express themselves and improve coping. And supports, find and study support journaling as a positive intervention to help cope with stressors, which is that's why this intervention was used in this study to help inmates cope with solitary confinement. And journaling is associated with decreased mental health distress, as I just stated. And the third thing was patient outcomes, which are coping, hope, and well-being. The goal is to improve coping, resulting in hope and positive well-being, mental health well-being. The setting to participants. The setting was a 120-bed solitary confinement unit located within a 1,300-bed prison in the southeastern region of the United States. And the participants were adult male inmates housed in solitary confinement at the time of the project. This includes from the start of the project to completion of the project. The methodology is a longitudinal quasi-experimental design. The collection of data were from the following sources, which was inmate tracking base, which is the Track, which keeps up with the housing locations of inmates, as well as other demographic data of the inmates who are housed in the prison settings. And the electronic medical records was used to look and see if they had a history of mental health, a diagnosis of mental health, was they had mental health treatment at the time of the study. And the pre-coping and post-coping questionnaire, which is called the RECOPE, was given before the intervention of journaling to determine the coping levels before, as well as after the 30-day journaling to determine the post-coping. And these scores were compared after the study, after the implementation of journaling. And the data collections sheet included the length of time in solitary confinement, the length of prison sentence, the length of time left to serve, as well as, if they had a current mental health diagnosis, as well as the scores from the pre-coping and post-coping to the three segments of the RECOPE, which was the problem focus, the emotional focus, as well as the avoidant focus. So these were the three areas on the coping tool that was used, and this was placed on the data sheet. The instruments and procedures I just discussed, the brief COPE, which is self-administered questionnaire, 28 items, and closed-ended, and the inmates had to choose between 1 and 4. So example one was haven't been doing this at all. So what the question asks, you have a choice between these four answers. Response two, a little bit. Response three is a medium amount. Response four was I've been doing this a lot. So each question was close in it, and these were the four answers that you had to choose. And it was administered pre and post of intervention to compare the scores. The intervention, as I just discussed, was a 30-day self-discovery workbook, a journaling site that included positive reading and writing materials, information, 30 days of reading and writing. Central focus was positive thinking. They're instructed to complete each daily activity as outlined in the book. For example, day one, they had to complete that. Day two, for the 30-day cycle of the intervention. For example, as I just stated, and they were instructed to complete the daily activities for at least 1 hour. Day one, day two, until it was completed within 30 days. Ethical considerations, important to look at ethical. Inmates are they're considered vulnerable populations and persons, so ethical principles will maintain protection of their rights was very critical. And first of all, the facility warden had to grant permission for this project to be conducted at the agency, at the prison, and then it required a full IRB, Maryville University IRB approval, and which is required. IRB full IRB approval required for those studies that indicated greater than minimum risk, as well as for special populations such as the prisons, inmates in prisons. Consent forms, and it's IR is meant to intend to say IRB, with a little typo there. Consent forms were signed. They had a right to refuse and to withdraw at any point. They were informed of that right, and there were no significant foreseeable physical, psychological, social, or legal risks. The only minimum risk there was a breach of confidentiality, but factors were in place to help minimize and prevent these issues, such as the removal of all patient identifiers, numeric codes were used, locked cabinets, protected passwords, and again, the benefits outweigh the potential minimum risk. And the procedure, first of all, approval from Maryville IRB. After approval was done, the project was implemented, including the participant being identified, the consent was signed, the brief code that we discussed earlier was given before the implementation of daily journaling, and then the daily journal was given. All these instructions, this was done by the researchers, including giving them walking to the unit and going cell by cell, giving these items versus to coping and to journal. This was done by the researcher. And also the researcher conducted week around to monitor journaling to see if there was any thoughts of self-injurious behaviors or anything that was dangerous that was put into the journal. And after 30 days of completion of the journal, this researcher re-administered the same brief cope for the post-coping scores, and then the journals were collected by the researcher, and then analysis of the data was started after the 30-day journal activities were completed. The results and findings. The number sample, the population was 48, which was the adequate number for the statistical purpose of the study. The outcomes of the data were determined by comparing the means of the three coping styles on the brief cope questionnaire, which was the problem focus, emotional focus, as well as the avoidant focus. The p-values were used to determine the outcomes would show insignificant change, and they were measured by the 95% confidence interval of the p-values to see if there was a significant level of significance. And the difference in the pre and post coping were it did improve. However, statistically, the scores were not enough to reject the null based on the p-values were greater than 0.5. So statistical purposes have to say the journaling, the intervention was not significant enough to indicate the journaling improved coping based on the confidence interval of 95%. And the scores were not at a significant level to indicate that it improved coping. But the scores did improve in each area. Slightly improved, still improved, but just not enough at a significant level. And I have posted here the histograms to show, for example, the first category of the brief code was pre problem focus. On the left, you have the pre-coping scores. On the right, you have the post-coping scores. You can see they did improve. Again, as I stated, not to the level of significance as indicated based on the p-values. The second category was emotional focus. Again, on the left, you have the pre-coping scores. On the right, you have the post-coping scores. Again, the scores did improve, but not to the level of significance based on the confidence interval of 95%. And the last category, according in the brief code questionnaire, was the avoidant focus. And to the left, you have the pre, to the right, you have the post. And the only thing in the scores with the avoidant is you want the scores to go down because that's not the important way of coping, So in this case, you want the scores to go down instead of up, because down meant good in good situations. Again, scores are not significant at the significant level to indicate that journal improved coping. Again, scores have improved. Meaning of the findings, comparison, as I stated, the comparison of pre-cope and post-cope was done to compare the effects on the scores, the effectiveness of the scores, and see if they improve. Again, I just stated not statistically at the level of significance, the p-values were all greater than 0.5, so we have to say that statistically, the findings did not indicate that journal improved coping based on statistical status. But journaling did help based on the scores it improved, but we cannot conclude that statistically significant based on the confidence interval. The strength of the studies. Let's look at the strength of the study. It was one major strength. It was conducted the agencies where the researcher worked. So this increased the familiarity of the overall operation and function of the facility by the researcher. The researcher had first-hand knowledge of the operations of the solitary confinement of the overall prison itself. And this familiarity was very important to increase communication as well with the warden. So had very good in-person relations. So he approved the project, which is very strength. And full IRB was approved. And studies such as on inmates are very strict and tend to not always get approved. They have very rigid protocols to it. So that was a very strength that this project gained approval, full IRB approval from Maryville University. As well as all participants were located at one location, which made it easy for the researcher to know where the participants were and to have access to the participants. And again, the familiarity of the inmates to the researcher, they gained trust. They had trust. The researcher had a history of working with most of the inmates in the past, so they were familiar with the researcher. They knew the researcher, and this helped gain their trust and made it participate in the project. And the key term again was familiarity. The researcher worked at the agency, so that increased the familiarity of the operations of the prison, which was very helpful. The limitations was that it was a 30-day cohort study in comparison to a longitudinal study. This limited the ability to continue to monitor effectiveness of journaling over a period of time. This project was limited to 30 days, and longitudinal studies may allow for more, they do allow for more extended monitoring for longer durations. Even though the sample was 48, which is adequate for this study, perhaps the sample that was a bit larger may have improved the scores to the outcomes. So these were limitations. And post-implementation insights, the barriers. There were no significant barriers. The facilitators outweighed the barriers. One of the barriers was communication behind locked door, but the researcher was familiar with this process, so was able to maneuver through this barrier and was used to discussing and communicating behind the door with inmates behind the door. So again, the familiarity of the researcher to the environment managed this barrier and overall barriers. Post-implementation insights, facilitators, the researcher again was employed at the agency, 20 years at the site, familiarity of the contextual factors associated with solitary confinement. All of these helped and presented as facilitators. And the researcher had extensive knowledge base of the needs, the recommendations to improve mental health well-being. 20 years experience, working at the prison was very helpful, very much a facilitator. And history working closer with prison officials to previous projects. All this improved interpersonal relationships, which made it a little bit easier to gain approval to conduct the project. There was trust involved in these relationships. Trust between the prison officials and the researcher, as well as trust between the inmates and the researcher. And communication skills, as just discussed, were very important. Interpersonal relationships, trust, and positive factors promoted effective facilitation of the project. Implications for future practice and research, significant. There's significance to ongoing approaches similar to this study project to improve the ability of inmates to cope with solitary confinement. If solitary confinement continues to be used, there's important to develop interventions to help inmates cope with solitary confinement. In future studies, to focus on journaling among solitary inmates and solitary confinement, as well as associated interventions to help inmates increase their coping skills in coping with solitary confinement. Future studies may benefit from longitudinal studies, as I've discussed. This allows for monitoring over a longer, extended period of time than what was done in this project, which was a 30-day cohort study. It is important to future studies to analyze the impact of solitary confinement on the mental health well-being of the inmates, such as this project did it. The importance of ongoing research, the goal is to further offer more statistical significance of the use of journaling interventions to improve coping as well as other interventions, to show statistically that these interventions are important and provide positive outcomes. Implementation for healthcare. Healthcare policies are very important to force and sustaining policies. So legislators, lawmaking bodies play a very important role. Research provides evidence-based studies and to promote changes in policies. So implement changes are more likely to be enforced if they're incorporating policies. This is essential at the local, state, and national level. Haircut policies are very important in sustaining interventions. So again, it has implications for haircut policies. Quality and safety implications. Solitary confinement presents a quality and safety problem. Inmates in solitary confinement um, are predisposed to behavior issues, and they present with history of behavior and violence, and some of them, and as well as we said, separation behaviors and suicide. So they're definitely creating implications for quality and safety issues. So again, separation behaviors and suicides are very high among solitary confinement. So again, these are quality and safety implications. Conclusions. We've discussed the topic of this DNP Scholar project, which is the implementation of daily journaling among inmates in solitary confinement to improve coping. One of the major issues identified in this group is the inability of inmates to cope with solitary confinement. So the purpose was to implement journaling among inmates in solitary confinement to determine if it's improved coping, as previous studies have indicated the use of journaling as an effective intervention in improving coping. And a critical factor to solitary confinement on the well-being of inmates is that it creates negative mental health well-being. Um, this project is an important example of developing interventions and analyzing interventions to improve coping. The findings again, although it did not indicate at a significant level that journaling did improve coping, scores did improve, which indicated that it's an important intervention, it was beneficial, but it will benefit from ongoing studies. So again, the study's findings did not indicate that journaling did improve based statistically at the level of significance, but did show increase in scores. So it's very important to realize and understand that. And the project significant is that it can be applied to the site where it was implemented, as well as to other prisons. It can be generalized to other prisons who utilize solitary confinement. So again, very important to this site where it was implemented, as well as to other prisons who use solitary confinement. Because it's very well understood that the conditions of one solitary confinement is typically very the same as other solitary confinements, regardless of what prison it is used as. And in conclusion, evidence-based research studies such as this project involving inmates in solitary confinement represent significant ongoing advancements to improving the conditions of mental health well-being of inmates in solitary confinement. So again, I would like to emphasize that the purpose of this project was to implement journaling among inmates in solitary confinement to see if it improves coping skills, and there's importance to ongoing studies to this topic. I have the reference listed here that was used to develop this project and this presentation. And again, this concludes this presentation. I want to thank you all for listening to this presentation. Very much appreciated. I hope that this presentation has offered insight to the topic, the purpose, significance, as well as the intervention that was introduced in the study, as well as the findings and outcomes, as well as the overall importance of ongoing studies and projects and research to this topic. Again, my name is Evelyn Dunn, DNP student at Maryville University. I have my email listed I have my phone number, contact number listed. If you have any questions, any concerns, any recommendations, just any information, feel free to contact me at my email or phone number, and I will be more than glad to discuss this topic with you. Again, I want to thank you for taking the opportunity to listen to this presentation. Have a good evening.